Hey guys, I'm so sorry this has taken a while. I finally got my camera fixed, so now you'll actually have better video quality than usual. So we are on number 7 of my Magical Girl anime countdown, and my number 7 pick is Pretear.
果てしない未来広がるこの空新しい自分に生まれ変わる世界中幸せの雪を降らせてみせるよ
Pretear is another show that you can essentially blame Anime Network for getting me into. I was looking on the Girl Power channel that they have there, and Pretear was there. It sounded like a funny name, and it didn't have the word princess in it, so my bias then led me towards it, and I found it to be a very quaint and endearing Magical Girl anime. And so when I was compiling this list, I put it as number 7 because I felt it had more of a, linear narrative than the other 2 series I mentioned. But then when I was writing this review, I was thinking to myself, yeah, that's cool, but what else do I like about it? What else is there, as, Derek from the Swan Princess? So part of the reason why it took me a while to get this video out was that I decided to rewatch Pretear from an analytical point of view, and doing so made me see the series in an entirely different way than I did before, which reaffirmed my assessment of putting it at number 7 on this list. The producer of this anime was also the director for Princess Tutu, and if you look at the character designs of the main leads like Sasame, Hayate, and the Princess of Disaster, and Himino, you can see a hero, Fionn, Duck, Mitho, Rue, so it's very obvious there. And so I hope this review will get you interested. The plot. It's a little bit of Cinderella in there to go with the fairy tale motif. Himino's father has recently married a very wealthy widow named Natsue, and as a result, she is trying to adjust to this new life, the kind of public attention, because the family is so wealthy that they literally, everything is named after her family now because of her stepmother, and she has a rocky relationship with her step-siblings, and so when she runs into Hayate, who is one of the knights who presents her with this great destiny of being Pretear, it kind of seems like a really good way for her to finally find her place in this new role that she's not really used to. And as the Pretear basically is kind of like a mythical being who, when she transforms with another knight, turns into this Pretear, and the Pretear possesses these abilities which allow her to kill these kind of like semi-demonic creatures which drain the life force, which is called Life in this anime, of living creatures. And it's her duty to protect the world and to defeat the Princess of Disaster, whose goal is to drain the world of Life and send it into darkness. So let's get to the characters. Himino is the main lead, and she's kind of like a really endearing mix between Sakura from Cardcaptor Sakura and Usagi from Sailor Moon, in the best ways, I feel. As I will kind of bring up more in the theme section, she's very willing to make sacrifices for other people. Her priority is really helping people. She's very kind and considerate, which I found to be very refreshing, especially after Legend of Korra. It was good to see a character who was actually willing to make sacrifices for the good of other people and actually have to grow. She has a lot of insecurities of her own, like I mentioned before, about fitting in her new place, but she understands the bigger picture in her world, and she's willing to, sacrifice things to benefit others. What I especially liked about her was her sense of duty when it came to her relationship with the knights, because when they preed, which is kind of a transformation thing, they can turn into shields to protect her if she is in danger. And when she realizes that her inability to fight and perform in these battles could lead to the injury of other people, she immediately tries to, practice and become better at being the Pretear because she doesn't want other people to get hurt. And I really like that. It's a kind of sense of like duty and responsibility for the powers that you have. Not just kind of like, I have superpowers, so I'm just going to do this and this and this. She actually cares about what happens to these people, and I find that to be just really endearing towards her character. And what really made me like her was that whole idea. She does have one major flaw that just annoys me, is the whole shoujo trait of being too clumsy to exist. It's like the most common female trope ever. Whenever a girl has to have a flaw to make her somewhat socially awkward or cute or something, she's always clumsy. And it's just annoying with Himeno, especially because she's supposed to be a black belt, and yet she can't walk. And so it's just kind of like frustrating that, they were doing so well with having a really strong character that they had to just give her that kind of obnoxious, oh yeah, she's strong, whatever, but she's a klutz. It's just kind of like one of those tropey things that I don't really care for in this particular genre, and I was kind of like, oh, she didn't have this, but at the same time, it never really took away that much from her character. So that was really the only thing I ever had a problem with her. Then you have Mawata, who I consider to be kind of like a secondary female protagonist. She is the younger of Himeno's stepsisters. There's another one called Mayune. This is Mawata. Mawata's character is very interesting because her emotions and psyche are delved into a lot in this series. She never really got over the death of her father when he died when she was very young, and she has been carrying the emotional baggage of that for a very long time. I'm going to get more into this in the theme session because it kind of fits more there. But Mawata is an example of the type of character who martyrs herself. She wants to be everything that people need her to be, and as a result she never does anything for herself. And instead of, that's a word, fits in themes more than it does in this kind of random character thing, but Mawata is kind of like that kind of character. She gives a lot, but she never gets anything back, and as a result she just gets very angry and bitter, but she keeps it all inside. Hayate is the love interest. He's the Lifei Knight of the Wind. He is neither special nor obnoxious, meaning that, his biggest flaw is that he is just a cliche. And I think, he is, one of the main characters I feel brings down the show. Not because I dislike him, because, again, I generally have no problem with his character. But he is just so much that shoujo guy. He's dark, got the long hair, he's got angst and baggage, emotion. I don't want to love you, but I love you. It is very cliche, but the execution of it, I feel, is what saves it from being too irritating. Because his relationship with Himeno, as you get into the story, becomes very endearing and sweet, and just the way they interact with each other is just very charming to me, that I end up liking it in spite of hating that type of, angst male interest. He has a lot of his damage, however, does come from a genuine place. He is kind of responsible for the creation of this new Princess of Disaster, and therefore, in the past, the death of 3 of his comrades. So if you're going to be upset about something, that's a good thing to be upset about, I suppose. The second major male character is Sasame, and he's the Lifei Knight of Sound. His character was really interesting for me to watch, especially retrospectively, since I knew what was going to happen to him, of seeing basically his breakdown as a character, and seeing how there are little signs of his kind of, his emotions kind of about to burst out, and his own feelings, which, it's all very subtly handled with him. And he's a very interesting character, but I can't get too into it because I would run into spoilers, and I don't want to spoil any of these series I'm talking about. But I feel like his character really touches on kind of that same thing that Mawata does. He gives a lot for nothing in return, and that builds up, and it creates a kind of war. Then there are other knights, because this is based on Snow White. There are 7 knights: Kei, Go, Manin, Hajime, and Shin. They are just side characters. They're there to fill the space. The younger ones, which are Manin, Hajime, and Shin, are there to show the consequences of what Himeno what happens if she fails, which was the death of them. And since they're the youngest knights, they're the most susceptible to being killed now, and they are kind of what also motivates Himeno to keep being Pretear, is her sense of responsibility towards the younger of the knights. The other 2 are just kind of there to be background to help out. So they don't really play that big of a role, they're just kind of there. And then we have the Princess of Disaster, who's also called Fiona, and then her real name I won't say, but she is the foil to the Pretear, because a Pretear can become a Princess of Disaster. I don't think that's that too big of a spoiler, but the Pretear, the Princess of Disaster is kind of the perfect foil to the Pretear, because the Princess of Disaster is the foil to the Pretear, just like Snow White and the Evil Queen. This is kind of their kind of dichotomy in the show. And the Princess of Disaster, she became what she was. And the Princess of Disaster's goal, basically in the series, is to take all the life force of the world and destroy it. Her purpose is to spread misery and distrust and tap into the inner sadness of people and just use it against them. And again, talk about it more in the theme section, but yeah, she's just, she's the villain. And so there are two big themes in Pretear. One is family, and the other one is this combination idea of goodness attached to selfishness and selflessness. When it comes to family, we have this, it's based on two fairy tales that have very deep family issues. But Pretear, what I like about it is how it doesn't demonize blended families. Himino does have kind of conflicts with her stepsisters and her stepmother, but it's not like they're not evil. Natsue, who is her stepmother, doesn't hate Himino. She's strict because she comes from a wealthy background, and so she expects certain things like manners and those kind of things, but she doesn't hate her. In the manga, this is played more straight, which is why I don't like the manga as much, but that'll come in later. With Mayune, who is the stepsister who's Himino's age, they're antagonistic, but it's more in kind of like, this is the new kid, I get to pick on her and tease her, she doesn't know my tricks. It's more like in a playful way. And then with Mawata, it's just Mawata's own insecurities that stop them from having a real connection. But they do get to talk and stuff, so it's not as if, it's completely demonizing the fact that this step family can't work. They do work, it's just that it's taking a while for them to adjust because it's a new thing for everyone. And I also like how Mawata was explored, because usually when you get the step siblings, their whole angst and what they could be going through is completely ignored. Like, we all know Cinderella misses her mother and she cries over the tree and blah blah. But what about the stepsisters who don't have a father? What's their baggage? Do they carry any? And I think that the show really does examine that very well. And I think it also examines, with Himino not knowing her place, is that whole kind of Freudian thing about how, like, in these fairy tales like Cinderella and Snow White, there's this whole idea of, like, the daughter becomes kind of like the wife mother to the father figure, and now that her father has a wife and has someone who will cook for him and take care of him and help him, what can she give him now? Now he's got a wife and two more daughters and all the money in the world, so what can she offer him that they can't? And I just thought that was something that was really well handled and was very poignant in the show. And then the other thing I said is goodness attached to the idea of selfishness and selflessness. What Himino will often say in this series is that she's got to be strong to protect everybody. And there is a sense that Himino kind of represents true selflessness, because the main reason why she becomes Pretear is to protect people. It's so that she can help those little kids that I told you about the younger of the knights. She understands that if she doesn't step up to the plate, if she doesn't, get herself in check, they could die, and that will be on her, and that's her responsibility, and she takes full responsibility for that. So even though she does have insecurities, and she does, and those things happen, she has her little emotional breakdown thing, but at the end of the day, she recognizes that this is bigger than her, and that at the end of the day, like, she has it better than most people, and she kind of gets it, and that's what keeps her from going into misery and becoming that kind of dark character that the Princess of Disaster is. And I just thought, like, when you look at the characters of her, Mawata, and the Princess of Disaster, how really fascinating that kind of idea is. Like, she's that true good person who does things out of the kindness of her heart for nothing in return. She doesn't want someone to like, even though it fulfills a void for her, it's for other people. She doesn't want anything back for being Pretear. This is enough to be able to help people, and to be a part of something bigger than herself is enough. Then you get the Princess of Disaster, who became that person because she wanted something for selfish reasons. She wanted to get something back. And when she couldn't get that, she felt no longer reason to be that kind of pure-hearted person. What's the point of doing all stuff if she can't have something in return? And so while she started off while she did good things, it wasn't for good reason. She wanted something. She didn't care about other people. She cared about satisfying herself. And her arc as a character is interesting, but I talk about it because, again, spoilers, just watch it. It's only 13 episodes long, guys, come on. But yeah, her character is about, how we can sometimes do good things for the wrong reasons. It's fine that she wanted to be a good person, but she wanted to do it to impress someone else, to make someone else happy. And it was to satisfy her own needs and not to actually help people. And then you get Mawata, who's kind of an interesting mix of both. And the character I kind of identify most with in this series because when her father died, Mawata took on the role of being the rock for her mother and her sister. But there was no one there to be the rock for her. And so from, that young age, she's been holding in all this sadness and frustration, but in order to protect her mother and her sister, she's being strong for them. Her mother has this speech, she's like, "You never cry, you're the perfect daughter," and she's like, "No one can be that perfect." And her whole, story is about her, trying to be like, I was doing this to make other people happy while I was suffering, and there was no one to hear her suffering. And, how if you don't have people to be there for you, how much harder it can be. Hamino has the knights who, fulfill that role for her. Mawata had no one. And so that really, and every time she had to reach out for someone, there would be someone else. There was no one who was there just to help her while she was helping everyone else. And that's why she's kind of the martyr character. She gives and she gives and she gives at the detriment of her own soul. So, the flaws with this anime. Well, initially I hate harem anime of any gender, but thankfully, while it has sort of hints of this is not a harem anime. Hamino has one love interest, that's it. Sasame has his own stuff, and everyone else is kind of like filler. It's not, they all like her, they all care about her, but it's not like, oh, we all love you, and tension yo shit. It's not like that. So that was good, but the hints of it just annoy me anyway. And really that was my main thing. Did I have anything else? Sorry, I keep looking at this because I had notes. Oh, there are two annoying side characters. One is Hamino's annoying friend with glasses, and the other one is Tanaka. They're just annoying. They're just kind of there to be those filler characters who are there to keep comedy going. I don't find them funny, so they can go away. But overall, I think this show accomplishes exactly what it's trying to do, besides those two kind of tidbits I have problems with. But like I said, there is a manga for Pretear, which I have and have read. This is one of the few occasions where I actually prefer the anime to the manga. So I think that the anime handles the characters better. I think it handles the plot better. Even though the manga came first, I think the anime is really a stronger adaptation. It really subverts more aspects of the fairy tale tropes, and I think it creates a more engaging narrative than the manga. So it's not like I wouldn't recommend the manga, I just think that it is too standard compared to the anime, which tries to do something different. I like how the dichotomy between the Pretear and the Princess of Disaster is different from the manga, because in the manga, the mother is kind of the antagonist. She gets possessed by the spirit of the Princess of Disaster, and it plays that kind of Snow White evil queen thing more direct, and I like the more family-oriented relationship that it is in the anime, so I prefer the anime. And just to wrap things up with my final thoughts on this, I really am glad I rewatched Pretear, because this is kind of the best example about what I meant about realizing the depth in something that initially I only found enjoyment in because it was girly fun, the cool outfits, cute guys, that kind of fun stuff. But I realized upon rewatching it about how, it was talking about emotions and what it meant to be a good person, and, just the different ways that people are motivated to do things and what that tells you about them and their situation. And I think that Pretear has a lot of depth that goes unrecognized because of, you know, the very classical and sometimes cliche shoujo things that are in it. But I think when you watch it, and I would recommend people to watch it, is just watch it with an open eye. And I think that that will help you absorb what, you know, is really interesting about it. On the other hand, just from a purely, like, forgetting about, like, analytical point of view, it is a very cute, enjoyable magical girl show. It's more magical girl than UC or Panty and Stocking, which is why it's 7. And I think that on this list there are a few anime that I feel are really, you know, directly magical girl more so than others. And this one is so. If you like card captors, you can watch this. Basically, is what I would say. This is kind of that same kind of, like, it's a magical girl series. It's got some, you know, subversion, but it's not really about making something extraordinary. It's about telling a really fun magical girl story, and that's what you get with Pretear. So I highly recommend it to fans of magical girls, fairy tales, and just, you know, fun, pretty things. And the opening sequence is really pretty, and the song is really awesome. And the transformation sequence will make you lol because it's very awkward to look at. And so, I will have my number 6 video up as soon as possible, which is featuring a magical girl anime from Clam.